Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to Napoleon's Marshals Part 1 by Epic History TV. Now I have before reacted to the Napoleonic Wars, so you got a little bit about, but this is a more, judging by the title, clues in the name, it's all about the more in-depth look on Napoleon's marshals, the brave men who served Napoleon dutifully. Wow, I actually said that right. Right, so the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please subscribe to Epic History TV, and this should be an interesting one. Let's get into this. Oh god, that went right through me. Jeez.
Terror belli, decus pacis. Terror in war, ornament in peace.
Okay.
The words inscribed on every French marshal's baton.
Wow.
In France, the title of Marshal or Maréchal goes back at least to the 13th century.
Wow.
It represents the highest possible position of military authority. Authority symbolized by a marshal's baton.
Wow.
The title was abolished during the French Revolution as incompatible with the egalitarian spirit of the age.
Okay.
But in 1804, Napoleon founded a new empire and restored the ancient rank. That year he picked 18 of France's best generals and made them marshals of the empire.
Wow.
8 more were created in the years that followed. The marshals outranked everyone in the new empire, apart from Napoleon's family, princes and ministers of state. They came from every background, sons of aristocrats and innkeepers, professional soldiers and those who'd learned on the job, old school Republicans and Bonaparte loyalists. The youngest, just half the age of the oldest.
Wow.
And though Marshal was a civil title, not strictly a military rank, the men known to the army as les gros bonnets, the big hats, were arguably the most extraordinary, diverse, brilliant and flawed group of military commanders in history. The most favoured were showered with titles and wealth.
Oh yeah.
But the price too was high.
Of course, I remember that was if we go back a bit. Hang on.
Military commanders in history.
Give me a sec. Because I'm pretty sure that's, unless my eyes aren't deceiving me, that's Murat, who was, if I remember rightly, was made King of Naples, even though in the end he betrayed Napoleon to try and keep his throne in Naples.
Price too was high. Half were wounded, 3 were killed or died of wounds. 2 were executed.
Wow.
This is Epic History TV's guide to Napoleon's marshals. All 26 have been ranked according to our own evaluation of their achievements as marshals, with expert guidance from retired Lieutenant Colonel Remy Porte, former chief historian of the French Army.
Oh, and if you look up here, if you can see my mouse, up like not in towards the top left corner, Bernadotte eventually became Crown Prince of Sweden, and someone I think someone said in one of the episodes I reacted to of the Napoleonic Wars, apparently the House of Bernadotte still rules the royal family of Sweden till this day, so that's an interesting fact to put out there. And there's Poniatowski, sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, the Polish Marshal. There's Murat. The Iron Marshal, Davout. And there's Salt. And wasn't it Suchet that was recalled from Spain in disgrace? I can't remember. You got Oudinot, who's one of the toughest, and Marshal Ney, the bravest of the brave. That's what I remember anyway. Oh, another traitor right there. But anyway.
First, a thank you to our sponsor, Call of War.
Just my limited
Call
knowledge.
of War is a free online PvP strategy game played by millions of users worldwide that gives you the chance to rewrite World War II history. Choose your country, join the war, and fight other players in epic real-time campaigns that unfold over the course of weeks for free. Available only for 30 days.
Okay.
More than 2,000 French generals served in the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars.
Wow.
Many were brilliant leaders. A few probably deserved to be marshals, more than some who were. Any selection can only be difficult and highly subjective, but here's our pick of 12 of the best.
Okay. So talking about generals.
Bertrand, Napoleon's faithful aide-de-camp, who commanded 4th Corps at the Battle of Leipzig.
Wow.
Clausel, a veteran commander of the war in Spain. Desaix, Napoleon's close friend, killed at Marengo, aged 31.
Wow.
Prince Eugène, Napoleon's adopted son, a hero of the Russian retreat. Gérard, one of Napoleon's best corps commanders by 1814, made a marshal by King Louis-Philippe in 1830. Goudan, whose infantry division bore the brunt of the fighting at Auerstedt in 1806, died of wounds near Smolensk in 1812. Junot, who first served with Napoleon at Toulon in 1793, probably committed suicide after his fall from favour in 1813.
Wasn't Junot the one that's repatriated by what's that British commander's name? Dalrymple. Repatriate Junot, and then I think it was Dalrymple was to never hold command again because of this. I could be wrong.
13. Lassalle, the Hussar general, among the best light cavalry commanders of the Napoleonic Wars, killed at Wagram, aged 34. Maison, who told his division on the morning of Leipzig that they must win that day or all be killed, made marshal by King Charles X in 1829. Nansouty, the heavy cavalry commander who died of wounds and exhaustion, aged 46.
Wow.
Saint-Hilaire, hero of Austerlitz, died of wounds received at Aspern in 1809. Vandamme, of whom Napoleon once said, "If I had to invade hell, I'd want him commanding the vanguard." And now, Napoleon's 26 marshals, ranked in order of merit.
Okay.
26. Marshal Perignon. When Napoleon created the first 18 marshals, 4 were honorary marshals, recognized for past service to France. Perignon was one of these. A former officer in the Royal Army, he'd won fame in the Revolutionary Wars, fighting the Spanish on the Pyrenees front.
Wow.
He later served as ambassador to Spain. After a brief retirement, he was sent to Italy and commanded the French left wing at the disastrous Battle of Novi, where the army was routed by Suvorov's Russians, and Perignon was badly wounded and captured. His appointment as honorary marshal in 1804 was a political move by Napoleon, a way to win acceptance for his new empire, by emphasizing continuity with the revolution, by rewarding its military heroes. Perignon never held active command as a marshal, but served as governor of Parma, and later Naples. His eldest son, Pierre, was a cavalry officer, killed at Friedland in 1807. Perignon retired in 1813, but refused to support Napoleon when he returned from exile in 1815 and was stripped of his marshal's baton. His rank was later restored by King Louis XVIII. 25. Marshal Brune.
He became the savior of the Batavian Republic. By saving Holland, he also saved France from invasion.
Brune was another marshal whose appointment owed much to politics. As a fiery Republican and former close ally of revolutionary leader Georges Danton, his support was politically useful for Napoleon. Brune joined the army during the Terror, the most extreme period of the Revolution. His political
which I believe was mostly masterminded by Maximilien Robespierre, if I remember rightly.
Connections ensured rapid promotion, and he was sent to help put down a counter-revolutionary revolt in Bordeaux.
Someone put down in the comments, how big is the city of Bordeaux? Because I heard it's huge, apparently.
1795, as a 30-year-old brigadier general, he helped Napoleon disperse a royalist mob in Paris with the famous whiff of grape shot.
I think that was more than a whiff.
Brune then served with Napoleon in Italy, fighting in several of his famous early victories. He won a reputation as a fierce divisional commander and enthusiastic plunderer of Italian towns and churches. In 1798, he commanded the French occupation of Switzerland, while extorting 200,000 francs from the wealthy Swiss communes, the equivalent of several $1 million today. It was said that Brune's personal carriage was so laden with gold when it left Switzerland that it immediately broke down. The next year he won his most important victory.
When it comes to greed, all powers are just as bad.
Commanding French forces in Holland, defeating an Anglo-Russian army at the Battle of Castricum, and saving France from invasion.
Wow.
But a short, calamitous spell commanding the army of Italy convinced Napoleon that Brune was not fit for high command. Instead, he sent him to be ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, where in 1804 he learned that he'd been made a marshal. But Brune's lack of delicacy, combined with a towering sense of self-importance, did not make him a successful diplomat. He was recalled to France, but as governor of the Hanseatic ports, blundered again, drafting a treaty with Sweden that failed to make any mention of the French emperor. Whether a deliberate insult or act of incompetence, Napoleon was furious, and Brune was sacked. Brune spent the next 7 years at his country estate. He bitterly opposed the return of the Bourbon monarchy in 1814 and rallied to Napoleon when he returned from exile the next year. But in the tumult following Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, Brune was cornered by a royalist mob in Avignon, murdered and tossed into the River Rhône.
Jeez, that's harsh.
24. Marshal Serurier.
Retained all the characteristics and severity of an infantry major, an honest man with integrity and reliability, but unfortunate as a general.
Serurier was another of the 4 honorary marshals whom Napoleon wished to recognize for past service. In contrast to Brune, Serurier was a professional soldier of the old school, a veteran of the 7 Years' War, and a stern disciplinarian. This background was not necessarily an asset during the French Revolution, when any officer who'd served in the Royal Army was viewed with suspicion. But Colonel Serurier's training and diligence were soon recognized as assets to the new French Republic. By 1795, he was a general serving with Napoleon in Italy, where his stand against corruption and looting won him the nickname the Virgin of Italy. Serurier was a reliable, if unspectacular, commander who won an important victory at Mondovi at a crucial moment in Napoleon's rise to fame. The following year, he accepted the Austrian surrender at the end of the long siege of Mantua. 2 years later, fighting under General Moreau's command, Serurier and his division were cut off by the Russians and forced to surrender. Released on parole, he was back in Paris in time to support Napoleon's coup d'etat of 18 Brumaire. Serurier then retired from active command, but Napoleon, remembering his past service, made him an honorary marshal and governor of Les Invalides, the retirement home and hospital for old soldiers. There, shortly before the fall of Paris in 1814, Serurier oversaw the burning of more than 1,000 captured flags and standards to prevent them falling into Allied hands.
Oh yeah, didn't they also, apparently, I think if I remember rightly, they also burned Frederick the Great's sword and sash. No wonder why the Germans were angry at the French for so long. Probably still are in a little bit.
23. Marshal Kellermann.
I think I was probably the boldest general who ever lived, but even I wouldn't have dared to take post there.
Kellermann was another honorary marshal, the oldest at 68, and famed throughout France as the saviour of the revolution.
Okay.
A career soldier from a middle-class background, he'd seen distinguished service as a cavalry officer in the 7 Years' War. At the beginning of the Revolutionary Wars, he was a general, commanding a frontier army at the moment of greatest crisis, when it seemed foreign invasion was about to stamp out the revolution and restore the ancien régime. But at Valmy, in September 1792, Kellermann's army of the centre stood its ground, and with a ferocious artillery barrage, persuaded the Prussian army to withdraw. Valmy was not a stunning tactical victory, but it was a turning point of history that saved the infant French Republic. When the revolution took a more radical turn, even a war hero like Kellermann became suspected of royalist links, and spent a year in prison under the threat of the guillotine. Acquitted and restored to command, he was poised to launch a new offensive in Italy, when he was sidelined, first by General Scherer, then in favour of a rising new talent, General Bonaparte. Kellermann later specialised in army administration and training, a role he continued to perform under Napoleon, whilst also entering politics and serving as President of the Senate. His son, General François-Étienne Kellermann, followed in his father's footsteps, serving as one of Napoleon's best cavalry commanders.
Like father, like son.
22.
Grouchy.
Marshal Grouchy.
His conduct was unforeseeable, as if his army on the march had been struck by an earthquake and swallowed up. Oh yeah.
When Napoleon returned from his first exile in 1815, he created one last marshal for the upcoming campaign, Emmanuel de Grouchy. Although now infamous for failing to march to Napoleon's aid during the Battle of Waterloo, up to that moment Grouchy had had a long and distinguished military career. An aristocrat who embraced the French Revolution, Grouchy served with distinction throughout the Revolutionary Wars, fighting counter-revolutionaries in the Vendée and serving in Italy, where he was wounded and captured at the Battle of Novi. Under the Empire, Grouchy excelled as commander of a dragoon division in Marshal Murat's cavalry reserve. He was praised by the Emperor for his part in the great French charge at Eylau, played an important role buying time for Napoleon at Friedland, and expertly covered the French right wing at Wagram. For the invasion of Russia, he commanded 3rd Cavalry Corps and was wounded at Borodino. He survived the horrors of the retreat, but was left so exhausted it took him several months to recover. He returned for Napoleon's 1814 campaign in France, and was wounded twice more. Grouchy was made a marshal at the start of the 100 Days campaign, and commanded Napoleon's right wing at Ligny. After the battle was won, he was ordered to pursue the retreating Prussians to prevent them joining up with Wellington's Anglo-Allied army. 2 days later, as the Battle of Waterloo raged 10 miles to the west, Grouchy made the fateful decision to follow his written orders, rather than march to join Napoleon, and has been widely blamed for the French Emperor's defeat ever since.
Whatever happened to him?
Grouchy's vilification is not wholly fair, not least because Napoleon rarely encouraged his marshals to show initiative, and often flew into rages if they deviated from his written orders. Nor should one blunder obscure the distinguished record of one of the Grande Armée's best cavalry generals. Grouchy fled to America after Napoleon's defeat to escape royalist reprisals, but was pardoned and returned to France in 1820. 21. Marshal Moncey.
He was an honest man. Okay. Short and sweet.
Moncey ran away from home to join the army at the age of 15. After 20 years of uneventful service, he'd risen no higher than the rank of captain. But then came the French Revolution. Most French officers were aristocrats, who, if they did not actively oppose the revolution, were nevertheless regarded as politically suspect. The result was that 3/4 of them either fled the country or were dismissed from the army. Moncey, a middle-class officer with no strong political views, reaped the benefit, with meteoric promotion. By 1794, General Moncey was leading the army of the Western Pyrenees to victory over the Spanish, on what was, admittedly, a relative backwater of the Revolutionary Wars. In 1797, he was dismissed for alleged royalist sympathies, but reinstated in time to support Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire. By his own admission, Moncey was a sensitive officer, honest, honourable, but lacking a ruthless streak or iron will to succeed. Napoleon was aware of his limitations as a general, but made him a marshal in 1804, as part of his emphasis on continuity between the Republic and his new empire. Moncey was appointed Inspector General of the Gendarmerie, France's militarized police force, and spent most of the rest of his career commanding reserve troops. He only held one field command again. In light of his victorious record against the Spanish, he was given command of a corps for the 1808 invasion of Spain, operating in the south of the country with mixed success. In 1809, he was replaced by General Junot and returned to France. Moncey's finest hour came in the dying days of the Empire, leading the National Guard of Paris in a courageous but doomed defense of the French capital. In 1815, the restored King of France, Louis XVIII, ordered Marshal Moncey to preside at the trial of Marshal Ney for treason. Moncey regarded Ney as a hero for having saved so many French lives in Russia, and refused, declaring, "If I am not allowed to save my country nor my own life, then at least I will save my honour." After a short spell in prison, Moncey was allowed to resume his military career, becoming governor of Les Invalides, in which role he presided over the repatriation of Napoleon's remains from St. Helena in 1840. At the end of the ceremony, the 86-year-old Marshal Moncey announced, "And now, let us go home to die." 20. Marshal Poniatowski.
A man of noble character, brimming over with honour and bravery.
Prince Józef Poniatowski was the King of Poland's nephew, but his military career began as a cavalry officer in the Austrian army, even serving as aide-de-camp to Emperor Józef II himself. In 1789, he transferred to the Polish army with the rank of Major General, but could not save Poland from partition by its rapacious neighbours.
I'm probably going to offend some people here, but what the hell. I do feel sorry for Poland and Lithuania, because they seem to be... Because I think after Napoleon, I think it's been 100 years from this point. They've been under foreign rule for over 100 years. I can understand. Someone did reveal to me that Russia had something against Poland, because apparently Poland invaded Russia and claimed Moscow, apparently. I'm not very clued up about Lithuania, so don't judge me on that. but I never understood the problems Prussia and Austria had with Poland and Lithuania, but as I said, my knowledge about this bit is limited, so can't help but feel that Poland is probably the most screwed over country in Europe during this time. I could be wrong.
Capacious neighbours, Russia, Prussia and Austria.
Wow.
By 1795, Poland had vanished from the map, swallowed up by its rivals. After Napoleon's defeat of Prussia in 1806, Poniatowski decided loyal service to the French Emperor was the best way to win Poland's restoration, although he never fully trusted Napoleon's aims.
Really?
Sombre, serious and brave, Poniatowski proved an able commander of Duchy of Warsaw forces in Napoleon's service. When war broke out with Austria in 1809, while Napoleon advanced on Vienna, Poniatowski waged a brilliant supporting campaign against a larger Austrian army in Galicia. For the invasion of Russia, he commanded the Polish 5th Corps. He and his troops distinguished themselves first at Smolensk and again at Borodino, leading the attack on the right wing. Poniatowski and his corps performed heroically throughout the campaign, motivated in part by their old animosity towards Russia. But by the end of the retreat, 5th Corps had been virtually destroyed. Poniatowski remained loyal to Napoleon, even though the disaster in Russia paved the way for the Russian reoccupation of Poland. He rejoined Napoleon in Germany in 1813 and was given command of the Polish 8th Corps. On the eve of the Battle of Leipzig, he was made a Marshal by Napoleon, in recognition of his service and to inspire his Polish troops. Poniatowski was the only non-Frenchman to receive this honour. He and his troops fought with their usual tenacity and skill at Leipzig, holding key villages on the southern front against the Austrian and Prussian onslaught. At the end of the battle, Poniatowski commanded part of the rearguard. But their only escape route, a bridge over the Elster River, was blown up too soon. Badly wounded, Poniatowski tried to escape by riding his horse across the river, but he was swept from his saddle and drowned. He had been a marshal for just 4 days. In the short term, Poniatowski's loyalty to France achieved nothing, as following Napoleon's defeat, Russia occupied Poland for the next century. But Poniatowski's legend lived on, a model of Polish patriotism that inspired future generations. Marshal Jourdan.
I certainly use that man very ill. Jourdan is a true patriot and answers to many things that have been said about him.
As a young French private, Jourdan saw combat in Georgia during the American Revolutionary War, but he then caught a fever that led to his discharge and plagued him for the rest of his life. When the French Revolution began, he was elected captain of his local National Guard unit, fought at the battles of Jemappes and Hochschutter, and was rapidly promoted to general. In 1794, he made his name defeating coalition forces at the Battle of Fleurus. This was a crucial victory of the Revolutionary War, which handed France control of Belgium for 20 years. It was also notable for the French army's use of balloon reconnaissance, the first effective use of an aircraft in military history. Jourdan became a prominent politician under the Directory, lending his name to a law that formalized France's policy of mass conscription. As a committed Republican, Jourdan refused to
believe not all of France was, not all of the French peasants were behind, because as the narrator said at the beginning, that not all of France at first was, they didn't like the extremism of the revolution, but eventually all fell into line eventually.
Jourdan refused to support Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire,
Okay.
But his fame as the Victor of Fleurus was enough to ensure he became a marshal in 1804. Jourdan was on good terms with Napoleon's elder brother, Joseph. When Joseph became king of Spain in 1808, Jourdan went with him as his military advisor.
Okay.
But the situation in Spain would prove beyond Jourdan's military skills to solve. He faced stubborn resistance from the Spanish and Portuguese, supported by the British, and an equally stubborn refusal to cooperate from other French marshals in Spain,
Wow.
theoretically under Jourdan's command, but who repeatedly ignored his orders and openly questioned his competence. Marshal Soult in Andalusia was a prime offender, while Marshal Victor's insubordination at the Battle of Talavera contributed directly to the French defeat. Struck by another bout of ill health, Jourdan went home to recover.
Wow.
2 years later he
Died of
returned to
cholera.
Spain. But at the Battle of Vitoria in 1813, he and King Joseph were outmaneuvered and decisively beaten by Wellington, leading to the collapse of the Bonapartist Kingdom of Spain. Jourdan never held a major command again, but his 20 years of service and evident patriotism were widely recognized and respected. He was made a peer by Napoleon, a count by Louis XVIII, and died in 1833 while serving as governor of Les Invalides. Perignon, Brune, Serurier, Kellermann, Grouchy, Moncey, Poniatowski, Jourdan. 8 down, 18 to go. Join us for part 2, when we'll continue the countdown. Coming soon.
And we'll do that. We'll do that another time. So this has been another interesting video from Epic History TV. If you like this reaction, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.